and the rest of the committee. Dr. Morrow, I mainly recorded this video for you. I know you'd be very interested in my statistical methodology and would be very concerned with my due diligence, and I wanted to show you what I've been doing. So here's my SPSS raw data, identification, independent variable, and there are two levels, choice of text and no choice of text. There is the GMRT pre-test, which will serve as the covariate for this analysis. There's the GMRT post-test, which will serve as the dependent variable, measuring reading achievement. Here's also some survey data that Dr. Granke asked me to incorporate into this study. I have done so, not in this analysis that you're about to see, but I've done some correlational analysis that you'll see in the document. But we're mainly going to focus on the pre-test, post-test, and the two levels of the independent variable. So there's several assumptions to be met for a one-way ANCOVA pre-test, post-test model. There's 3 standard variables and then 5 big ones. So the first assumption is having one dependent variable that is measured at continuous level. The GMRT post-test is a continuous dependent variable. Assumption 2, one independent variable consisting of 2 or more groups, and we have that here. We have 2 levels of independent variable, choice of text and no choice of text. Assumption 3 is one covariate that is continuous, and the GMRT pretest, which will be our covariate, is a continuous covariate. Now we get into the important stuff. This is what will be included in my document. Independent observations. That is one of the assumptions. In this study, no one was placed in multiple groups. No one was placed in multiple groups simultaneously. Test scores were kept from the students of any group. The only way to access the pre-test or post-test scores were if students asked about these scores after the study was concluded and the post-test had been delivered. So independent observations were maintained. Obviously, the classroom is not a laboratory, but we sought to satisfy this assumption as well as we could. Now we get into the analysis that SPSS will provide. The first assumption for a one-way ANCOVA is linearity. Now, there's 2 ways to do this. There's the easy way, which is this, simple scatter dot, click that, define. As you can see, I've pre-populated this. The y-axis will be the post-GMRT test. The x-axis is the GMRT pre-test, and I set markers by group. Click OK. And as you can see, the output is right there. Let's double click that. I'm going to add a goodness of fit, couple of goodness of fit lines, subgroups. Click that. And as you can see, this is looking very pretty. I've seen way worse intersections and lines off to the side still proceed with the ANCOVA. However, the homogeneity of regression slopes assumption will let me know if this intersection is statistically significant or not, and if it's violated it, even though the visual inspection looks okay. There's our slope. Now there's a harder way to do it, and the hard way is going back to graphs and manually building this thing. And as you can see, I've pre-populated this one as well. I have the post-test in the y-axis, the pre-test in the x-axis, and I have set colors by group. I'm going to click axis, y-axis. I'm going to uncheck this box. I'm going to click OK. Double-click this line. Click elements, fit line at subgroups. And there it is again. And as you can see, the slope is equivalent to the first way I calculated this. So visual inspection looks okay. This is a slight intersection. The homogeneity of regression slopes assumption will let me know if this is a violation. We have a beautiful upward 45-degree trend, and that was paralleled by the matrix plot I included in the dissertation text as well. You can find that on page 72 of the text. See, we have a lovely upward 45 trend in the matrix. Next comes the homogeneity of regression slopes, where we find out if that intersection has destroyed our assumptions. So I'm going to go to Analyze, General Linear Model, Univariate, and as you can see, I've pre-populated this as well. In the dependent variable, I have the GMRT post-test. In the covariate, I have the GMRT pre-test, and fixed factors is, of course, the group. I'm going to go to Model. Now, I'm not doing the ANCOVA yet. I'm still assumption testing. So instead of running a full factorial, I'm going to build custom terms. And this is pre-populated, but I want to show you what I did. All right. So the first thing was add group, add pre-test. Now I'm going to hold Shift key and add group by pre. Click continue. Now, this is the part where homoscedasticity and Levene's test of equality of error variance starts to come into play. I have the option to save the residuals. I have calculated the residuals. I'm not going to do that in this video, but I have calculated the residuals and done the normality and assumptions testing on those. Those figures can be found on page 71, I believe. Yes, and keep in mind, the homogeneity or variance of their homoscedasticity, it's really only required for sharply unequal groups. In this test, there was 26 in the treatment group and 26 in the choice of text group and 26 in the no choice of test group. So this isn't explicitly required for this analysis, but I wanted to show you that I still did it. I still calculated these figures. Normality testing for the residuals revealed a Kolmogorov-Smirnov p-value of 0.2 and Shapiro-Wilk of 0.261. So that assumption is in good kurtosis and skewness statistics. So that assumption is satisfied. And we also have Levene's test of equality of error variance reveals a p-value of 0.803. So this is more than satisfied, but let's go ahead and run it. All right. This looks good. What we're really concerned with here is the group by pre line of the test of between subjects effects. And remember, we're assumptions testing here still. We're testing the homogeneity of regression slopes. And as you can see, this p-value fails to reject the null hypothesis, and we conclude that this assumption of homogeneity of regression slopes is satisfied, as the intersection is not statistically significant. Next, we have normality. I tested normality at every level of this. I conducted independent samples t-testing of the pre-test at the outset of this study, as well as normality testing of the pre-test total, all 52 subjects, and then also normality testing of the pre-test between groups. If you look on page 69 through 71, you can see all those normality tests that I did. And all of them were solid. The t-test between groups before the outset of the study was within reason. There's our p-value and the accompanying figures. T-test concluded that there was no significant... T-test failed to reject the null hypothesis, and we concluded there was no significant difference between groups based on the pre-test at the outset. So I thought it was safe to proceed with the study. Mainly because this line is worth repeating. Though ANCOVA is considered robust against either a normality violation or a violation of homoscedasticity, it is not robust against both simultaneously. So I wanted to include those figures. QQ plot, histogram. When I separated the groups and conducted normality testing on their pre-tests between groups, there was only one issue. The choice group showed acceptable skewness, but the kurtosis statistic was admittedly high. In all the analysis, normality testing, t-testing, and ANCOVA, and testing of homogeneity of regression slopes and independent and all that, This is the only statistic that was iffy in the entire study. However, it did not exceed twice the value of standard error. I have some citational authority that says it's okay to proceed. If you have an objection with that, I'm open to learning. Let's continue though with the actual ANCOVA. Let's go to Analyze, General Linear Model, Univariate. Instead of building terms, I'm actually going to run a full factorial. This is the actual ANCOVA that I'm going to do right here. Click Continue, Options. I definitely want to make sure I'm including estimates of effect size. Continue. Dependent variable post, group, pre, looks good. And here we go. Levine's test of equality of error variance is right here. Also fails to reject the null hypothesis. So equality of error variance, or homoscedasticity, is maintained there. And under group, for tests of between subjects effects, we have our p-value. We fail to reject the null hypothesis and conclude that no significant difference exists between the choice of text group and the no choice of text group in this study. I have a lot more to say about this, about effect sizes and p-values and the literature review. The literature review dictating an extremely high, the literature review reporting an extremely high effect size, which led to a pretty low sample size, to be honest. I have a lot to say about that in the discussion, and I look forward to talking about it at the defense. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you soon.